Welcome to the 2022 Symons Medal Presentation and Lecture on the State of Canadian Confederation, proudly presented annually at Confederation Centre of the Arts. Awarded to Canadians who have made outstanding contributions to our country. Previous recipients include Mary Simon, Dr. David Suzuki, Professor Margaret McMillan, the Honourable Murray Sinclair, the Honourable Bob Ray, and the Honourable Louise Arbour. A total of 22 recipients have been granted the award, hailing from coast to coast to coast. The Symons ceremony is held in the birthplace of Confederation to mark the anniversary of the Charlottetown Conference of 1864. Long before that historic meeting, Prince Edward Island was known as Apaquet to the Mi'kmaq who have lived here since time immemorial. We proudly move forward together in the spirit of reconciliation and to continue the ongoing conversation of an evolving Canada. Since 2004, the Symons Lecture Series has provided a national platform for diverse and distinguished Canadians to share their thoughts on the current state of Confederation, giving all Canadians the opportunity to reflect upon our country and its future. Named in honor of the late Professor Thomas Symons, a visionary and founding president of Trent University, Professor Symons was widely recognized for his contributions in the areas of public policy, heritage, and education. Since Canada's Confederation, this nation has continued to evolve with a desire to become a better country. Sharing her unique perspective on Canada's evolution and the role of listening and narrative in the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people is this year's Symons Medal recipient, Shelagh Rogers.
Gwe, bonjour, and welcome to the 2022 Symons Medal Presentation and Lecture at Confederation Centre of the Arts. Along with Her Honour, Antoinette Perry, I would like to recognize the Honourable Dennis King, Premier of Prince Edward Island. There are a number of elected officials, Confederation board and staff members, and many other important people in the room today, and I wish I could greet you all in person, but it would take literally another hour or so to the proceedings. So I'll just say thank you to you all for being here with us today. Many people were involved in bringing this event. On behalf of us all at the Centre, I'd like to thank Confederation Centre staff, members of the Symons Medal Committee, who volunteer their time and make this all possible. One of the most active supporters of this event was Charles Scott, who sadly passed away this August. Charles was a longtime champion of the Centre, serving as a board member from 2005 until 2019. When he was appointed as a governor. Charles was a very active and engaged board member who supported many initiatives and co-chaired the Symons Medal Committee. Today, we remember his great legacy of friendship, generosity, wisdom, and mentorship, for which we will all be truly grateful. We are gathered here today, of course, to award the Symons Medal to Shelagh Rogers. The title of Ms. Rogers' lecture is Shut Up and Listen, Changing Our Story. This afternoon, Shelagh will share lessons she has learned from others and from her own experiences, honorary witness for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as she explores the importance of listening, the power of narrative, and its impact on the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. At the end of the event, you are all welcome to join us in the lobby for the Premier's reception to celebrate. We are fortunate to be able to join here today with the Poet Laureate for Prince Edward Island, Julie Pelchet-Lush, who I will now invite to the stage to provide a welcome and honor song. Julie.
Gwe, Jalasi, Ndeluisi Julie, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Julie. I am Mi'kmaq, and I reside in this beautiful, unceded territory known as Mi'kma'ki, and I'd like to welcome all of you in peace and friendship. Now, to start us off in a good way, I figured today would be a really good day for a prayer for the earth changers. Creator, I humbly pray, give my eyes the teaching of truth so that I can see what is there in front of me every day. Give my legs the teaching of humility so I know when to stand up and when to sit down. Give my mind the teaching of wisdom so I know with clarity what is right and what is wrong. Give my ears the teaching of honesty so I can hear the truth even when it's hard. Give my soul the teaching of courage so I can be brave and be who I really am. Give my heart the teaching of love so I have a reason to stand up for what is right. Give my toes the teaching of respect. Let me learn that all things must be valued. Without toes, it is very hard to walk, so even the smallest of things must have our respect. Give our hands the gift of creation so we can create beautiful things. Give our mouth the gift of strength so we can always say what needs to be said. Give our shoulders the gift of balance so we do not get burdened down by things we do not have to carry. Give our fingers the gift of connection. Intertwined with another makes us stronger and grounds us to one another. Let these teachings and gifts come into our bodies so we can be true to ourselves and be the change that the world needs right now. And now I'm going to share the Strong Woman song.
Thank you very much, Julie. And now to bring greetings from the province of Prince Edward Islands, let's welcome the Premier, the Honorable Dennis King, to the stage.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Bob and Julie. That was beautiful. Thank you. Good afternoon. Bonjour, Kwe. Jalasi Deloisi Dennis. To her honor, Lieutenant Governor Antoinette Perry. Our guest lecturer, Shelagh Rogers, Chair Robert, CEO of the Confederation Center of the Arts, Steve Bellamy, many of my fellow legislative assembly members who are here, other elected officials, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As the Premier of Prince Edward Island, it is a great honor for me to be here today, and it's a pleasure to be with you as we listen to our guest lecturer participate in the 2022 Symons Lecture. One of the very special treats of being Premier is the privilege to take part in an event such as this. And I can say that after the last 20 days and after the past 3.5 years, in which our province has faced some of its most challenging days, I can tell you that being here today and feeling some kind of normalcy, being gathered here with friends, is just a little bit extra special treat. So thank you all very much for being here. For almost 2 decades, the Symons series has showcased among its venerable guest lecturers some of Canada's leading voices from the arts, from law, from science, and from politics. And we add to that very impressive list today. And I have to say that as a kid from the Kays Road in Georgetown royalty who always loved a good story, I am especially excited to meet Shelagh Rogers, someone who I know loves a good story well told, and someone who has done so much to tell and share so many of the wonderful stories that make our country great. Growing up in rural Prince Edward Island in the 1970s, there were a few staples in our home. Like many of you can relate, that would include meat, potatoes, and mustard pickles with every meal, a teapot that did not seem to have a bottom in it, and in that beautiful, innocent, perfect world void of social media, cell phones, satellite dishes, and even cable TV, we had the CBC. And its television and radio services were engaging us in conversations and stories from across the country and around the world. And for me and for millions of Canadians listening to Knowlton Nash and Peter Zosky and Barbara Frum and Shelagh Rogers, they were able to draw out amazing insights and stories from their guests. They didn't only inform us and entertain us, but they inspired us. They inspired me on a journey to find and share stories. It instilled within me, it instilled within us a deep sense of pride for our country and the citizens that are so fortunate to call it home. And it lit within me a spark to seek a greater understanding of the role that I can play, that we can all play, to ensure our country remains great by honoring our values of unity, equality, and fairness for all. And I've come to learn, and I'm still learning every day, and I'm trying hard to practice what I learn, that real, lasting change first starts with meaningful and respectful conversation. And one of the best examples I can point to that in my lifetime is the conversation that has begun and we continue to have around reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples. I know this is an issue of great interest to our guest lecturer today as well. Now, it's ironic that Julie would be up here before me because earlier in my career, I had a great privilege to work for the Mi'kmaq Confederacy of Prince Edward Island. Her and Judy Clark, Elder Judy, who's here, who I said hi to earlier, I'd like to say they easily immersed me into the world of Mi'kmaq, but they really grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and they forced me in head first to it. And I'm so ever grateful for that. One of the things that I carry with me from that time are the stories from many community members that we had a chance to listen to, share their experiences and perspectives. At one table in Lennox Island, I remember to this day, after hearing a very difficult story of an elder who had endured a lifetime of addiction and abuse that was traced back to a residential school, I blurted out, "How can I fix it?" And that elder lady said to me, "Your job isn't to fix it. Our only hope is to change it. I want you to listen. I want you to learn. I need you to understand my experience, our experience, and when you truly understand it, we can walk together to a better tomorrow." Now, we have a long way to go towards that better tomorrow, but I believe and hope as a country that we're on that path, and we will remain on that path with meaningful and respectful conversation. And just because the stories that you hear may be difficult to hear, that doesn't mean they should avoid its telling. And if you think stories are hard to listen to, put yourself in the position of trying to imagine what it's like to live them. And there are few people in this country who have led more meaningful and respectful conversations better than today's guest lecturer, Shelagh Rogers. For decades, she has been one of Canada's most compelling and unique journalistic voices. Her work has informed and entertained millions of Canadians. I put it this way, I think she has a gift. She doesn't just interview guests, she has a unique ability to use her skills to create a safe space for important, tough, and difficult conversations to occur, whether it's in the air or whether it's on the airwaves of our national broadcaster or here today in this auditorium. Shelagh Rogers is above all else a great teller of stories. And to be a great storyteller, you need to have a good ear for a story, and you need to have an ability to create a spot around the table for the listener and the teller to engage, to listen, and to learn. And when you have that, the magic of story flows and understanding begins. And no one is better equipped to guide us through that conversation today about the magic of story and the power of understanding than our special guest lecturer. Welcome to Prince Edward Island. On behalf of everyone, Shelagh Rogers. Well, Alan, merci, thank you.
Thank you, Premier King. I would now like to ask Her Honor Antoinette Perry, Lieutenant Governor for Prince Edward Island, to join me here on stage for the introduction of the 2022 Symons Medallist.
Merci, Monsieur Cyr. Je suis enchantée d'être ici pour présenter Shelagh Rogers, l'une des journalistes radio-télédiffusion les plus respectées du Canada. Elle est l'animatrice et la productrice de The Next Chapter, une émission primée consacrée à la littérature au Canada. Durant son illustre carrière, elle a animé d'autres émissions de radio nationale comme This Morning, The Arts Tonight et Sounds Like Canada.
Shelagh is a vocal advocate for mental health care, adult literacy, and the reckoning for truth of Canadians' relationship with Indigenous people. In 2011, she was inducted as the honorary witness for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a life-changing honor. In that same year, she was named an Officer of the Order of Canada for elevating the cause of adult literacy, fighting against the stigma of mental illness, and by sharing the story of her own depression and for promoting Canadian culture. In 2016, she received the inaugural Margaret Trudel Award for Mental Health Advocacy.
Elle a coédité 3 livres de la série Speaking My Truth de la Fondation autochtone de guérison et en 2019, elle a été la première lauréate du prix Bibliothèque et Archives Canada en reconnaissance de son dévouement envers l'alphabétisation et le patrimoine historique du pays. Shelagh est titulaire de 8 doctorats honorifiques d'universités canadiennes et chancelière émérite de l'Université de Victoria. Shelagh est membre de la nation métisse du Greater Victoria.
Shelagh Rogers is joined this afternoon by her husband, Charlie Chaffins, and some close friends. We're so glad to have you here for this special day. And we're also pleased to present a few virtual messages of congratulations from some very special guests who could not be with us today. Let's see those now.
Hi, Shelagh. Congratulations on the 2022 Symons Medal. I couldn't be prouder of my chosen sister, my friend in fellowship, honored and honorable witness, bearer of honest and necessary stories, and listener. You are a marvel, and I'm so very, very pleased that your important work is being recognized in this way. Congratulations, dear friend.
Ani Shelagh, Congratulations from the Bay of the Manitou on Manitoulin Island in Lake Huron. As a master storyteller, you and your voice remind us of our humanity, of our capacity to rise up, to be better, to do better. You create space that allows this country to know itself and acknowledges that we are all connected together. That is an extraordinary gift to celebrate. Chimigwech. All the best, Shelagh, and hugs to your family. All my relations.
Shelagh, congratulations on the award. I think there's no one I can think of more deserving. Your warmth, your wit, your intelligence have made you a standout broadcaster in this country. I think the hallmark of a great broadcaster is the ability to connect with an audience, and you connect beautifully every time you talk on the radio. And personally, I always remember with great fondness when you and I read the Christmas Carol in various venues across the country. It was a lot of fun reading the carol with you and then sharing a martini afterwards. That's great, kid. Congratulations.
Hi, Shelagh. I'm guessing you recognize the background here. Congratulations on the Symons Medal. It is a richly deserved honor. Looking forward to your lecture and sending you love from all of your friends and family here in Woody Point, Newfoundland.
Hello, my friend. I am so very pleased, Shelagh, that you're receiving the Symons Medal for all that you have done. You've used that wonderful voice of yours to advocate for adult literacy, truth and reconciliation, and mental health. And by sharing your own story, you have been an inspiration to others. So congratulations. I hope you enjoy your day in Charlottetown. All the best.
Tanchi Kiowau, Rob Hancock Nsigasan. I'm sending this message from the beautiful territory of the Lekwungen people and from the University of Victoria, where we were fortunate to have Shelagh as our Chancellor for 7 years. I want to add my voice to the chorus of folks singing Shelagh's praises, unless, of course, this was meant to be a roast and I just didn't get that memo. I'm happy to offer my congratulations for this well-deserved accolade, which is both an acknowledgement of Shelagh's accomplishments and achievements and a statement about Shelagh herself. I'm thinking in part about the courage that Shelagh has shown for engaging in difficult and challenging conversations and her intentional emphasis on the role of listening in dialogue. But mostly I'm thinking about the care that she shows in her work and the love that guides and grounds everything that she does. So congratulations, Shelagh. We're so happy for you and we love you.
My dear Shelagh, I am so thrilled and delighted that you are being recognized as the exceptional woman you are. No one has used their platform to further the work of Indigenous writers more than you. Your vision of a more inclusive and just Canada is something we can all learn from. I am so happy for you. Congratulations.
Hi, my name is Randy Boyagoda. I'm a novelist, professor of English, and longtime contributor to The Next Chapter, hosted by Shelagh Rogers. Congratulations, Shelagh, on winning the 2022 Symons Medal and delivering the lecture. I think of Shelagh as Canada's equivalent of St. Augustine. St. Augustine said the purpose of all literature is to increase love. Shelagh, in so many different ways, increases love of reading, of writing, of writers, and of each other.
Hello, Shelagh. I don't know if you remember me. It's Rick Mercer here. You interviewed me on your radio program a number of times about my various literary endeavors, and I interviewed you on my television program about your illustrious broadcasting career. And it was a great day. And we went swimming. And I remember we decided we were going to roll around in the surf like that romantic scene from Here to Eternity. And instead, a wave took us, and we ended up beached like a couple of obscene water mammals. There was no dignity that day. And yet, look at you now. Look how far you've come. My God, the Symons Medal, that is the epitome of dignity. And when I look at the great Canadians who have received this medal before you, I am in awe. I am so proud of you. Congratulations. Love you. Hope to see you soon.
Hello, dear Shelagh. Congratulations on receiving the Symons Medal. There are few people who know this country better than you. Your work as a journalist and broadcaster We first met at CBC Radio's Morningside with Peter Zosky, but that's quite another story. And your habit of visiting every province and territory year after year, working on behalf of literacy, reconciliation, mental health, inclusion, and so many other things, it means you have literally talked to and listened to more people and perspectives than anyone I know. That puts you in a unique position to, as Professor Symons wanted, to reflect upon our country and see, how's it doing? What is our current state? And what is our next chapter? Of course, I had to say next chapter. There's no one better than you, my dear friend, to honor the past, respect the stories, and share what you hear and think with the rest of us. Lucky us for your commitment to conversation and for your love of this country. Congratulations to you. Big love.
Hi, I've been asked to give a strong reference for Shelagh Rogers, and I was thinking whether I could try and think of something negative to say about Shelagh as she receives the Symons Award. I can't think of anything negative to say about Shelagh. Shelagh is one of the most wonderful people I know. She is honest, she is open, she is positive through all of the challenges that she has faced and that she shared with all of us. She loves Canada, and I think Canada loves Shelagh. And certainly I do, and so does my wife, so it's all okay. We love you, Shelagh. We wish you well. You're a great person. Congratulations.
And now, Confederation Center of the Arts is proud to present the 2022 Symons Medal to Shelagh Rogers.
It's not a martini. Wow. Gwe, good afternoon. Bonjour, mes amis. It's such a great honor to be here. And I would like to acknowledge the wonderful people who are here in this hall. Elder Judy Clark, Her Honor, who, as she walked past me, said, "Go get him, girl." And Mr. Premier, your words were very, very moving and took me back to a time where CBC Radio was it. And I'd like to get back to that time. I'd like to acknowledge Senator Brian Francis. I'm so glad you're with us. And the Honorable Percy Down, Mr. Senator, welcome to you. Former Lieutenant Governor Frank Lewis, the Honorable Sean Casey, the Honorable Blois Thompson. Thank you so, so very much. And Julie, wow, you were just amazing. And I really like the ear the best. Ear's the teaching of honesty, so I can hear the truth even when it's hard. My second favorite is definitely toes, though. Thank you for the incredible honor of being invited to speak with you, and thank you for being here. I would like to acknowledge, with respect, the history, traditions, the living culture of the Mi'kmaq and the unceded territory on which the Confederation Center stands. I'm honored to offer my respect to the Mi'kmaq people, and I grieve the years that I blithely made my way through my life and through PEI without knowing whose territory I was on, without knowing I was in Mi'kmaq. I would also like to honor the lecture's namesake, Thomas Symons, and his gusto for working to make the country and the world better. I honor his humor, his mischief, his great gift for friendship, the zest for his quest for knowledge, his passion for universities, and his vision of an equal relationship between teachers and students. So thank you, Thomas Symons. We are keeping your fire. Anne Shirley, I know I don't need to say this next part, she of Green Gables, okay, once said, "I'm so glad to live in a world where there are Octobers." But I would like to acknowledge the September that you have just endured. Watching from the West Coast, I and many friends were moved by the strength and resolve of people in Atlantic Canada, in the face and especially the eye of Hurricane Fiona. Neighbors caring for neighbors, giving everything you got. Restaurants like Jay's Chicken and Pizza, operated by Carol Yang, offering 1,000 free meals in Glace Bay and Sydney. Sumitra Burke and the Pad Thai food truck, cooking hot food and giving it away here in Charlottetown. Talk about cooking with gas. The Port aux Basques minor hockey team, spending a day unloading a supply truck with necessities from all over Newfoundland. Neighbors helping neighbors clear a 30-foot wall of debris in Robichaud, New Brunswick. Those are but a few of examples of East Coast resilience, compassion, commitment, community. You are a force of nature, and your generous spirit is felt right across the country. There is a fundraiser here in this beautiful hall called Sweet Relief, a fundraiser, a Fiona fundraiser sing-along this coming Monday, September 17th, right here in the Sobey Family Theatre. Confederation Center of the Arts is presenting this fundraiser in support of Hurricane Fiona relief, hosted by National Phenomenon Choir, and will feature special guests like Joel Plaskett and others. Funds raised will go to the United Way of Prince Edward Island and be distributed to chapters across the Atlantic. My first job at the CBC was doing public service announcements, so I was very happy to give that a plug. As was mentioned by Bob Sear, a little over a month ago, Charles Scott, a man so connected with the Confederation Center for the Arts, a brilliant lawyer, and my Symons lecture whisperer, died unexpectedly. Charles cared deeply about his family, many of whom are with us today. I'm so honored that you're here. And he cared about Canada and justice and fairness, food and wine. But my pathway into his friendship was our common obsession with correct punctuation and good grammar. And as I offer my condolences to his family and to his colleagues, to everyone who knew him well, in all honesty, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for his persuasive powers and irresistible sparkle. I wish he were here. Irregardless, I dedicate my Symons lecture to the memory of Charles Scott. But first, a word from my sponsor. This talk is co-presented by COVID-19. I tested positive at the end of June, and the physical symptoms lifted very quickly, but I was really quite stuck in a mental miasma, and I'm kind of still there. I lost my regular mind, and I did. And I have trouble thinking for long periods of time. Difficulty reading and writing. You can see this would be difficult to host a book program. I mix things up. Like the other day, I bought a large cookie to share with my husband, Charlie. And I turned my back to pour some tea, and half the cookie was gone. What happened, I said, when I put that cookie on the plate, it was a full squirrel. I meant circle. And instead of offering people my sympathy, I've offered them my symptoms. Please don't take them. I've reacquired an age-old dyslexia, and my memory is full of black holes, so if I don't remember your name later, I apologize. I know I'm speaking for many people in this country, maybe even in this hall, when I say that COVID really sucks. And sometimes I just want to scream. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron, who resides in Cape Breton, says, if someone comes along and shoots an arrow into your heart, it's fruitless to stand there and yell at the person. It would be much better to turn your attention to the fact that there's an arrow in your heart. So I'm paying attention to the arrow, talking about it for myself and for the people who, one reason or another, for instance, may lose their jobs, cannot. Though it shouldn't be good fortune, I am very fortunate my CBC colleagues are accommodating my brain fog, making things comfortable so I can continue to work. My husband has accommodated it by helping me to get here, among many other things. And the Confederation Center for the Arts has made accommodation by giving me the opportunity to talk a bit about long COVID, because when we talk about hard things, they become less hard. The center has also allowed me to address you in a different way other than a lecture. You may well be wondering, what on earth is she going to do today? Well, I'm going to do a radio program, a program about how we hear each other's stories and how we don't, and about the power of story to change things. Instead of reading quotes by some brilliant individuals I've had the honor of speaking with over the years, I'm going to play excerpts from those conversations. I've been a broadcaster for 47 years, with more than 40 of those at CBC Radio. However, it wasn't until the last 10 years or so that I've become what I would call a listener, and I'll show you what I mean. 45 years ago, I did my first interview with a writer. This happened in Kingston, Ontario, where I was hosting a daily current affairs program called Talk of the Town, and I was also the producer. I was 22. I had 2 years radio experience as a country and western DJ under my belt, and I'm sure that I was hired for this position because with my age and lack of experience, I was the cheapest option. A few weeks after I started, a publicist called to see if I wanted to interview Timothy Finley because he just won the Governor General's Award for the wars. And I said, sure, this would mean one day's programming taken care of. The following week, Timothy Finley showed up for a live interview with this awfully nice man named Bill, who I took to be his driver, but was in fact his partner, Bill Whitehead, a writer of TV and radio documentaries. Timothy Finley and I went into the studio and seated ourselves into 2 red Naugahyde swivel chairs that comprised the set. And we're live. First question, Mr. Finley, what was it that you actually did in the wars to receive a Governor General's Award? And so it begins. He did a Yogi Bear double take and said, well, I got it for my book, The Wars. And I said, you can get a Governor General's Award for a book? And he said, well, it is a literary award. And I said, well, I thought it was a military honor. And so there was just silence. And at this point, I was just sort of staring at the floor and swiveling like crazy in my chair. And then a miracle happened. Timothy Finley said, would you like me to tell you the story of the wars? And I said, yes, oh yes. And he could have walked off in high dudgeon or low dudgeon. I don't even know what dudgeon is, but he stayed and he gave me a story, a great story. When the publicist called, I heard the wars, and I assumed I'd be interviewing a veteran. As a student, I had worked summers at the Rideau Veterans Home in Ottawa, and I thought, yes, I can talk to a veteran. For a long time, this story was mortifying to me, but I see it differently now. There's the example of Timothy Finley's kindness, of course, and a lesson in not assuming who people are. It was also a lesson about not listening, and I don't mean to Timothy Finley. I clung to every word he said. It was about not listening to his publicist when she called. If I'd truly been listening, I would have asked her about who this soldier, Timothy Finley, really was. I carried on in broadcasting and was hired by the CBC in 1980. I hosted local current affairs programs and then national programs about the arts. In 1994, I interviewed an impressive young writer who would go on to become a beloved author in this country. And though he died 5 years ago, his books are still on the top 10 lists even now. His name is Richard Wagamese, and not having met him in 1994, I didn't know how to pronounce his last name, so I gave it my best Italian, Richard Wagamese. And he corrected me, saying, it's not Wagamese, it's Wog Amazing. And Richard was coming in to talk about his debut novel, Keeper and Me, the story of Garnet Raven, a young man connecting to his family and to his Ojibwe roots. My side of the conversation is a marvel of non-listening and tone deafness. Here is just a representative excerpt from our interview.
How much is Garnet you?
Well, I think the essential spirit of Garnet Raven is the essential spirit of Richard Wagamese, but the skeleton of his story is based on what happened to me, but the fleshing out of that, of the narrative is all created or assumed from stories of other Native people I've met through my travels, people who've given me things about their growing up as a displaced person who I thought, this is too incredible to pass by. I want to use this at some time to make a better story.
I should boil Garnet's life down a little bit into sort of more specific terms. He's very happy. His first words are Ojibwe when he's born. Along comes the Ontario Children's Aid Society in a green station wagon offering kids chocolate, and off they go. They're gone, and that's the last their parents see of them for a long time.
Right.
Was this your story too?
Except for all the fleshing out. I'm not sure exactly what happened with my family. We're still in a process of healing and addressing those problems, but I was taken away from my parents when I was about 4 years old, and I was removed from my siblings about a year later and put in a separate foster home. In my earlier life, I chose to react to those things with anger. That was all I had.
And Garnet answers back with humor.
Yeah.
To a large degree.
Yeah.
I mean, he goes through this incredible, is he Spanish? Is he black?
Because he doesn't have a framework of reference to answer back to anything about his own Native identity.
So that's absolutely cringeworthy. There was Richard opening up to me about his life, but this was an arts program, and my job was to talk about the book and not let it get too personal. So listening to what Richard was telling me, his own life story, well, that was the farthest thing from my mind. One of the subjects that Charles Scott and I wrote to each other about was etymology. And the roots of the word interview are entre and voir, entre vous, meaning to see each other. How lovely. And it's interesting that the online site Etymologeek lists a couple of other words that are descendants of the roots of the word interview. And those words are interfere and interference. And not long after that interference, and certainly not because of it, I joined the national program Morningside. And if you're a certain age, you will remember how Morningside connected the country every weekday with must-listen radio about current affairs and culture. The host of Morningside, as Shelley Ambrose mentioned, was my mentor and friend, Peter Zosky. And by the way, the Premier mentioned him too. And in 1993, you may recall that Jean Chrétien named Sheila Copps Deputy Prime Minister. In 1995, Peter Zosky named Shelagh Rogers Deputy Host of Morningside, which at the time meant I would present a 20-minute feature interview so he could take a smoke break. One Sunday night, though, I got a call from our producer. Peter had put his back out and couldn't make it in the next day, so it was time for the deputy to step in. When I hung up, I asked myself, how do I fill in for the great interviewer? How does Dorothy fill in for Oz? I called Peter and said, dude, what do I do? And he said, just listen. And I said, yeah, but then what? And he said, no, that's it. Just listen. You're going to have a set of very smart questions in front of you. They're just a roadmap. The most important thing you can do is listen. I made it through the next day's program trying to just listen, but I was so nervous. And the whip-smart producers who directed me were in my headsets telling me where to go. Question 4, go to 7, then back to 3, finish with 11. It was paint-by-numbers radio, and the broadcast was a bit of a bust. But Peter's advice wasn't. Focus on the person talking to you and not the next question or your next brilliant point. When you listen fully, your brain focuses on who is speaking as though they're the only person in the universe. Peter made you feel that way. And it takes practice. It is a practice. And I'm still learning about listening every single day. My capacity to listen would be profoundly called upon in 2011 when I had the honor of being invited to be one of the honorary witnesses to the testimonies of residential school survivors and their families at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's public gatherings. Witnesses act as a record keeper of what is taking place when an event of historic significance is happening. A witness tends to those narratives, cares for them. They may share what they have witnessed at the event, and they may be asked in the future to stand for the truth of what they witnessed, just like in Julie's poem, to act on what they've heard, especially if a falsehood has been spoken. It was an enormous honor and a lifelong responsibility. The writer Kim Eklund told me that the origins of the word witness go back to the Old English word meaning to testify, linked to the word inwit, or the inward testimony of the conscience. Kim said a clean inwit meant having a clean heart. I interpreted this as an instruction to grab a broom and sweep my heart clean. It took a Dyson. At the TRC events, I watched 3 listening exemplars: Commissioners Dr. Marie Wilson, Chief Willie Littlechild, and the chair of the TRC, former Symons lecturer, the Honorable Murray Sinclair. I could see them being fully present to the almost 7,000 statements from survivors, their families, and communities, and they are the ultimate witnesses. They have stood for truth and always will. The survivors at the Northern Gathering in 2011, where I was inducted, delivered their statements in the gym of Sir Alexander Mackenzie School, which was a federal day school. And during a break, I went out into the hallway for tea and ran into a woman I was acquainted with through Peter Zosky's adult literacy initiatives in the North. We greeted each other, and she told me she was there to give her own statement. I hadn't known she was a survivor, and I told her that. And she said, well, yes, I was. And then nothing. So that silence made me very uncomfortable. In radio, we call silence dead air. In fact, there was a time when if there were more than 10 seconds of silence, an alarm would go off in radio master control, triggering an on-air apology. We're sorry, we're experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by until regular programming resumes. And then some awful, ancient film music would waft in through your radio. But back to the hallway of Sir Alexander Mackenzie School. I'd always defaulted to filling in silences with talk. So I started bombarding this woman with questions. How old were you when you were taken? Where did you go? How long were you there? What did you do to get home? How did you make it through each day? And this survivor, now an esteemed Gwich'in elder, looked at me and said, "Shelagh Rogers, you have to shut up and listen." And she was right. By not shutting up, I was invalidating her story. I was taking over, trying to direct what she was going to say, just like I did in that interview with Richard Wagamese. When one person speaks and the other person listens, the speaker and the listener are intimately connected. They resonate, even if they're strangers. The Inuit rights advocate Louis Okaluk spoke at the Northern Gathering, saying the longest journey is from the head to the heart. Her Honor referenced the heart and the heart's ability to listen. And yesterday evening, she talked about how inside the word heart is the word hear and ear. And old dyslexics like me can see that silent and listen are made up of exactly the same letters. I wonder, in this era of constant distraction, of automatic indignation, of firing off comments without thinking, do we have room for the silence that is so much a part of listening? Has listening itself become a lost art? A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking with my friend Mike DeGagne. Dr. DeGagne is a professor at U of T Scarborough, the president and CEO of Inspire, and the founding and only executive director of the Aboriginal Healing Foundation. During its lifespan, it supported so many survivors on their journey through trauma to healing. Before the advent of the TRC, Mike would have heard and published the accounts of hundreds, if not thousands, of survivors. A couple of weekends ago, we were talking about the value of listening, and Mike made a fascinating observation.
You know, I was in a class the other day, and it was one of the very first times that I've done a hybrid class where I had about half a dozen people who were in the room with me, and then another 3 times that listening online. And I thought it was amazing that the people who were in the room over the course of the last 2 years of the pandemic have sort of lost the capacity to listen like we used to listen. They actually behaved in the room as if they were online. And so we've gotten away with this sort of really sloppy listening, staring off into space, or shutting the camera off and putting a load of laundry in, or all the things that we do as part of sort of this online culture.
Mike's term, sloppy listening, stopped me in my tracks. Who hasn't closed a video and put a load of laundry in, let the dog out, or texted a family member during a Zoom? I know I have. I like to put it all on the pandemic, and I know I'm already blaming my brain fog for that, but the pandemic created a long disruption in face-to-face, in-person gatherings. Places where we would get together, such as schools, friendship centers, performance venues, ceremonies like convocation and weddings, dining rooms to share meals and even arguments with loved ones. These places were closed to us, spaces where we listened in beautiful collectivity. The virtual sphere allowed us to be multitaskers instead of just listening. And I think, as listeners, yes, Mike, we got sloppy. Now that our homes and larger venues are open again, and virtual venues are still in use, not to besmirch them, they are certainly very useful. How do we call back the gift of listening fully? I don't think the answer is complicated. Universities and performance venues like this one, museums and galleries, community organizations, literary festivals, they all have a magic wand of convening power. They can call people together for dialogue, conversation, debate, provocative arts performance, new ways of thinking, to listen and to really hear. The TRC national and regional events brought us together, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to attend the powerful stories of lived experiences of residential school survivors and intergenerational survivors. Testimony that challenged Canada and continues to challenge our country to think differently about who we are. Stories that need honoring, respect, and caring for, the stories of survivors. I found I had to prepare myself to listen and to come with an open mind and a receptive heart. Michelle Good, who you saw earlier, is the author of 5 Little Indians, the best-selling, award-winning, including the Governor General's Award, just like Timothy Finley, a really great novel. The powerful storyline follows the lives of 5 characters after their time in residential school. And as Michelle told me on the radio, there was a reason I chose to pick up the story on the release of the characters. Trauma has a half-life. Trauma has a half-life that continues for generation upon generation upon generation. And when people ask, why can't they just get over it? I've started to transpose that into another question, which is, what is it that they're asking us to forget and get over? Michelle herself is an intergenerational survivor. Before she became a writer, she was a lawyer. For 14 years, she listened to and recorded survivor statements as an advocate for survivors. Michelle told me how she positioned herself to listen.
I had, I guess, a mantra about listening to these stories, and I guess a description of the demeanor that I had to have to allow it, right? To not be lawyerly or whatever, right? To allow it, because very often people would come to me and I would be the first, as a lawyer, and I would be the first person that they'd ever told about what happened to them. And so what I came to call that demeanor that I brought to those conversations was making myself small, right? Making myself small in that moment so that all the room that, except for my pen as needed, was theirs, so that they could have the room, they could have the space.
They could have the room, they could have the space. She kept herself small. I didn't know Michelle's mantra when I met the renowned Inuit doll maker Helen Aguptuk, but I carried "Shut Up and Listen" with me like a precious stone. Helen is an elder in Kanjiklinik, formerly Rankin Inlet, keeping traditional stories and art practices alive. She's been making dolls since she was 7 years old in residential school in Chesterfield Inlet. Her first doll was made of a bit of sheet, some yarn, and human hair. But today, her dolls wear caribou skin parkas with fine beadwork and sealskin boots. When I interviewed her, I turned on my recorder and asked her, where were you born?
I was born between Perry and Baker Lake. In that area, we camped in between Cambridge and Baker Lake. And around 55, 56, famine and sickness struck, so they moved my parents to Baker Lake. At that time, we were out camping. I guess early fall came, like first week in September. The boat came in to pick the kids up, me, my brother, my husband, and his niece. They just told us that we have to go to Chesterfield to go to school. So when we got into the boat, I started crying I'm sorry, this part is really hard on me. Anyways, when we left, I was crying my hardest. I could see my father standing on the beach. I could see my mom standing in front of the canvas tent. When we got to Baker Lake, well, the bay, There were just 2 or 3 houses at that time. Anyways, we slept overnight in a Catholic mission. The next day, the plane took us to Chesterfield. Excuse me. When we got to Chesterfield, the nuns told us to take our clothes off because at that time we were still wearing caribou clothing, headlights and all. I'm not shy to talk about the headlights. So we didn't have any running water. Some modern stuff like washing machines, ovens, stuff like that. Anyways, I took my clothes off. They put me in a tub or a shower. I don't remember. Anyways, after that, I dried my body. Then one of the nuns, I think, put a really smelly stuff on my head to get rid of the headlights. After my hair was done, they cut our hair like page boys. That whole year we were in Chesterfield, I could picture my parents still standing, my father like really close to the beach and my mother still standing in front of the tent, because we were never told how they were doing. Nobody gave us letters or call us or tell us anything about our parents. Then the end of the school year finally came. That same day, my brother told me they were going to take us to our parents. So when we landed, I somehow looked out the window and noticed that it's not the same as Baker Lake when we first left it. And I told my brother, I think they're taking us to a wrong place. Then he looked out the window, we landed. The people that were driving the Bombardier told us to get in. We got into the Bombardier, drove us for a little while. And first they stopped at a house where my husband and his niece got off first. He drove for just a couple feet away, then stopped. Then it was our turn to get off the Bombardier. When we got out of the Bombardier, my brother, who was older than me, I made sure that he went in the house, and I was thinking, I wonder whose house this is this time. My brother went in. I kind of looked before I stepped in the house. I saw my father standing right there. Oh, I was so happy. I started jumping around. I went on the bed. I jumped to the floor. The whole year I never did that in Chesterfield because any little thing we did, we'd be put into a closet. I think in that 1 minute I got caught up with that whole year I was in Chesterfield. And when I got in, I went right in. I kind of looked towards the bed. There was my mother. Oh, that was the happiest time of my life. My whole childhood went straight back to where I left it.
I'm so grateful to Helen for sharing her story, and grateful to you. We just had a 6-minute collective listening experience, and I can think of myself before I heard Shut Up and Listen, before I heard Make Yourself Small, and I would have peppered Helen with all sorts of questions. and I would have interrupted and disrespected her life story. Just as I did with Richard. But miraculously, I had the opportunity to speak with Richard many times over the years. We became close. And in 2014, we talked about his novel Medicine Walk, the story of Franklin Starlight and his estranged father, Eldon, who knows that he's dying. Franklin takes Eldon to the mountains to be buried, sitting up and facing east in the Ojibwe warrior way, and Franklin honors Eldon's last wishes. Richard talked about what honor meant to him.
It means to embrace the dignity and the integrity and the spirit of somebody. And thankfully enough, you don't have to wait until someone passes in order to do that. You can do that every day. And I think in terms of our relationships with each other, as kin, as families, as members of communities and members of a country, we need to look at that teaching of honoring and follow it, practice it, because what we're building here is a community of people that includes every voice. And unity can't happen if exclusion is allowed to occur. And I think if we can get to that old teaching about honoring and caring for and nurturing the integrity and the idea of somebody, that we can start that process of including everybody. And you know, we had a little conversation last night about what's going to happen with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission once its mandate runs out. And I think that it's up to us to embrace what that commission did in its 5 years. And what it did was honor the integrity and the spirit and the vitality of those people who endured the residential school tragedy. And we need to do that. We need to include all the voices if we're going to build a better and stronger country. And honoring is about that. Honoring means inclusive. Honoring means hearing. Honoring means listening. Honoring means holding and hugging and helping to heal. And I think if we can learn to do that as people, then the mandate of the TRC will be in our hands and not in the hands of a government or an outside body. It'll be up to us as citizens to be able to do that for each other.
The Honourable Murray Sinclair often spoke about how the passing on of foundational stories of belonging and identity were not honoured, and how the passing of the stories from one generation to another was disrupted by residential school. Murray talks about the 4 questions that bring groundedness, a sense of belonging, and an understanding of who we are. These 4 questions are guiding him as he writes his memoir, as he reflects on who he is and who we are.
Those questions are, where do I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? And who am I? And those questions, I didn't invent those questions. You know, I first heard them when I was studying philosophy at the University of Manitoba. And for me, it really, you know, I sort of held off on really pushing hard on it. But when my eldest, Nigan, was born, and as I was holding him, I wanted him to know more about his life, his total life, going back as far as we could towards the beginning of time, as he could, because I wanted him to have a better foundation in life than I had when I was growing up. And I had a good foundation of love, but I didn't have a good foundation of knowledge of what it meant to be an Anishinaabe.
Again, Murray's 4 questions are, where do I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? Who am I? Daniel Heath Justice, who you saw earlier, is a Cherokee scholar, UBC professor, and the author of The Way of Thorn and Thunder, a wondrous fantasy trilogy. He's written other books too. Daniel was guided by 4 questions as he wrote his seminal book, Why Indigenous Literatures Matter, though they are different from Murray's 4 questions.
And the 4 questions are, how do we learn to be human? How do we behave as good relatives? How do we become good ancestors? and how do we learn to live together? I had it right in front of me and I still screwed them up.
So how do we learn to be human?
Well, this I think is the big question, because I don't think whatever we're born, whatever bodies we're born into, it's our teachings that make us human. And that's one of the big questions in our knowledge traditions, but I think it's also one of the big questions in Indigenous literature, and the various forms of Indigenous literary expression. And part of the reason for that, too, is because our humanity has been questioned by settler colonial authorities since 1492. And so I think that's one of the big questions, is it's not just about how do we learn to be human in our own right, but how do other people learn about our humanity?
Daniel's 4 questions are: how do we learn to be human? How do we behave as good relatives? How do we become good ancestors? And how do we learn to live together? Daniel writes, it's our teachings, our stories that make us human, and stories articulate our humanity. Monique Gray Smith agrees. Monique is a born storyteller of Cree, Lakota, and Scottish descent, and she's the author most recently of the best-selling children's book called I Hope. Here is Monique on what books and stories can do.
Well, books and stories, they have the potential to transform us. And I think, I remember like in the early 90s, I was in this course with Shirley Sterling, and she was talking about writing her book, My Name is Pizza, and how afraid she was at the time to put it in the world, because it was like one of the very first books about residential school and experience and for young citizens. And I think about how, she held the branches for the rest of us to walk through. And I think that's what books do, is they hold back the branches for us to go into the story so that we can understand in a way that we might not be able to otherwise. Because sometimes if I'm listening in person to a person's story and I feel myself flooded with emotion, I might turn it off because I don't want anybody else to see that, or I might feel ashamed. But when we read a children's book or we read a novel and we are flushed with emotion, we have that space because we're reading. We're in often private space to be with the story and be with our emotions. And in those emotions, there's the possibility again for change.
Monique has adapted the best-selling book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer for young adults, and it comes out at the end of October. And I think young adults and old adults should read it because it gives us the possibility again for change. That possibility for change is what Daniel Heath Justice would call imagining otherwise. In fact, Daniel's motto on his coat of arms is Imagine Otherwise. The way we live differently, in a good way, is to imagine a new country, a better world for the generations to come. A new story, a better story, the way our ancestors imagined better lives for us, even though they were living in harrowing circumstances. The Métis writer, lawyer, podcaster, and scholar, Chelsea Vowell, really embraces Daniel's motto, Imagine Otherwise. She takes it very much to heart in her new book, Buffalo is the New Buffalo.
Imagining otherwise provides us with that space, that little bit of time that we can carve out of our everyday stresses to think about how we could act now to bring about a world that we want to pass on to our descendants. And I think it's a really, really important tool to use. That prefiguration can create the future if we do it intentionally.
In public conversations and on panels with some of the writers whose voices you've heard this afternoon, I would ask them how they imagine otherwise. And I would also ask a question that wasn't mine at all. It's the great American philosopher Tina Turner's question.
What's love got to do? Got to do with it. What's love got to do?
I asked Daniel Heath Justice about what love means to him.
Love is about courageous surrender to something bigger than ourselves. It's about relentless hope realized. It's about being okay with the mess and loving one another in spite of it. I think love is the biggest gift that we have. It's the most challenging call that we have. Love is also about righteous anger, but about directing that in ways that make it possible to come together and don't only tear us apart. And sometimes love is the self-love that means sometimes we have to step away and take care of ourselves because the relationship that we're in is just too painful. But with the hope that we can come back in better ways. So I believe in love, but I don't believe in an easy love. I think real love is hard work.
What's love for the hard work of love? What's love for words and story and books? What's love for the earth and all creatures, including other than human relatives? What's love for equity, rights, and love for a better future? What's love for reciprocity, respect, and generosity, for water, the sun, and the moon? What's love for everything that grows on this good earth, for the land we live our lives on? What's love for one another? What's love for our elders and our ancestors? What's love for our children and children yet to come? What's love got to do with it? As Daniel says, love is the greatest gift. It's also hard work. As our elders at the University of Victoria say, be prepared for all hard work to come. We're almost at the end of our time together. It's felt more like a visit than a radio program. And about visiting, in the summer of pandemic lockdown 2020, the Cree writer Harold R. Johnson and his wife Joan came to spend a few days with me and Charlie at our home on Gabriola Island. He said, let's just have a good visit. And I have to confess, I didn't really know what that meant. So I asked him, what makes a good visit?
Time. No agenda. Love. There should be some food, tea and coffee, water if that's all you have, and time, and just accepting each other as human beings, and patience, and storytelling. And storytelling and learning to listen to stories. If you learn how to listen with your heart, so imagine where your heart is physically within your body on the left side of your chest until you're aware of it, till you can feel it. And then just let it go. And when you do that, practice listening with your heart, your brain does something. It stops thinking of the answer while the person is speaking. And you can just listen. And when you can really listen, then you can hear. And after you've practiced this for a long time, you learn how to speak from the heart. And it's the same ritual. You imagine where your heart is, and don't worry about the words that are going to come out, because they're going to come out from the heart. And that's how you visit.
Harold died in February, and he was a wonderful visitor, sometimes telling small stories about his dog Buddy, and sometimes telling bigger stories about broken stories like the Indian Act. Harold believed what you do if a story was wrong or broken was simple. Change it, just like the Premier said. He understood what story could do, change things. His new book, The Power of Story, just out, and it's a must-read. Before Harold became a great storyteller, though, he was a great listener. And just before he died, he told me that the most important thing he learned about life was to listen. Just listen. I've been treated so kindly by so many wonderful individuals here at the Confederation Center, by the board, by Prince Edward Islanders generally. I thank you. My teachers, some of whom are here this afternoon, 3 very dear friends who came a long way, have expanded and sometimes blown my mind. Thank you, Mike, Tammy, and Louise. I honor you. Writers, you have put up with my crazy questions for 45 years, and I thank you. And you've listened patiently to me for 45 minutes. I hope we will create places where we can be together to hear the stories we didn't know before, where we can just listen and not be sloppy listeners. I hope that we will read novels, memoirs, children's books, poetry like Julie's book, poetry by great Indigenous writers, because reading helps us to imagine otherwise. I hope we will honor each other by holding and hugging and helping to heal. I hope we will shut up and listen so we can change the story of our lives together, and the story of this country, I hope. I once translated our blessed country into French as notre pays blessé, meaning wounded. And maybe it was what I really wanted to say. Let's mend this wounded country through story. Because as Richard Wagamese said, all that we are is story. From the moment we are born to the time we continue on our spirit journey, we are involved in the creation of the story of our time here. It is what we arrive with. It is all we leave behind. We are not the things we accumulate. We are not the things we deem important. We are story, all of us. What comes to matter then is the creation of the best possible story we can while we're here. You, me, us, together. When we can do that, and we take the time to share those stories with each other, we get bigger inside. We see each other. We recognize our kinship. We change the world, one story at a time. Walaliak, thank you, merci.
Thank you, Sheila, so much for that inspired lecture and for sharing your considerable experience with us. Truly inspirational. Thank you again. We have invited Catherine Warden to respond and express our gratitude to you. Catherine?
As my grandmother, and I'm sure many other grandmothers used to say, we have 2 ears, but only one mouth for a reason. To listen more than to speak if we really want to learn from people and make a difference in the world. Sheila, your inspiring words today have truly brought home that message. In your 47 years of broadcasting, millions of people across this country and beyond have listened to you as you skillfully and compassionately draw out the stories of Canada's top writers, as well as interviewees from many other walks of life. It is fitting that excerpts from today's lecture will be broadcast nationally, and that you've left your home in Victoria on Canada's west coast to speak here in Charlottetown. Fitting, given the tremendous reach and influence of your thoughtful interviews across this vast country. It was evident from your unassuming and humble interview style that you were not wanting to upstage the storytellers, that these were their stories. But we don't usually get the chance to know Shelagh Rogers as the listener, alongside all of us during these interviews. Today, you, Shelagh, were the storyteller, telling us your story of what it has been like on the other side of the microphone and of the wisdom you gained from that privileged vantage point. Through these powerful clips that you shared with us today, you've shown that to be a great storyteller, one needs above all to be a great listener and to listen with your heart. And more than that, that the world, not just the world of professional interviewing, would be a better place if we just learned to listen to one another better. A message that clearly resonates in today's complicated and wounded world. Listening to you today, we cannot help but be struck by the power of the statement you quoted from Indigenous writer Richard Wagamese, that all that we are is story. We are story, all of us. We change the world one story at a time. It's about finding in our humanity, our humanness, how to live together better. That is a message that would have strongly resonated with Tom Symons, whose love of Canada and its stories and the role of storytelling in creating social justice was boundless. As a student in the early 70s at Trent University, I had the privilege of meeting Tom Symons, who was Trent's president at the time. In the words of his daughter Mary, he was always mentoring and meeting with students, she said, always listening and encouraging. I recall President Symons on one occasion greeting us students by sliding down the banister at the president's residence, to the great delight of all of us students. Wherever he is today, attentively listening to the nationally important remarks from Shelagh, Tom Symons will undoubtedly be soaring down another banister in delight. Shelagh, it was a tremendous pleasure to shut up and listen to you today. On behalf of the Symons Medal Committee and everyone here, I'd like to express our deep appreciation for your insightful and memorable words today. Thank you so much, Shelagh.
Thank you, Catherine. Before closing, I would like to say this event is sponsored by the Symons Trust Endowment Fund, which was created to help finance this lecture series and engage people from across the country. Please consider donating to the Symons Trust Endowment Fund on the Center's website or the Development Office. On behalf of everyone at Confederation Center of the Arts, we thank you for joining us for the 2022 Symons Medal presentation and lecture. We look forward to connecting with you again for next year's event. À la prochaine. Thank you.
Thank you.